All right, as people start joining us, I'll just do a couple intros and admin items, Vince, before we get rolling with cyber. Thank you for joining All Health Amplify today. We're very excited to be ending the calendar year with this November session. We have All Health Amplify on the third Tuesday of every month in a webinar. And we do that every month except December, July, and August, because we know that our members are prioritizing their family and the holiday seasons in December and July and August. So this is a wrap for 2023's calendar year. So thank you, Vince, for helping us bring it home with cyber security. So we're very excited about that. A couple other things I wanted to let you know about. We've got some exciting sessions coming up in the new year. So make sure that you're paying attention to our website and the emails that we send out to help you register. So January, we're going to talk about indirect tax. It's maybe not the sexiest and exciting topic, but I think it's important to business leaders to understand how the indirect tax can affect them and how to deal with the audits, which always seem to come at the wrong time. And so we do have an expert in indirect tax, someone I used to work with back in my PwC days, actually, and now he's at one of the boutique firms. So he's going to be presenting with us in January, and that's our next session. We're very excited about that. We're going to also work with a former alumni that I worked with at Deloitte. Jesse and I both worked with, and we're going to talk about system selections and technology and trends in regards to emerging ERPs and other apps that are available to help business leaders grow their business. And so we've got Neil coming in February. And so both of those are on the radar for 2024, along with a few other great ideas. If you have topics that you'd like to see us present in the webinar series, please do be sure to let us know, and we'll do our best to get the right presenter and to tackle those topics. We also are planning, likely in March, to have a live session. We're really excited about working with a client who came about from a search fund and works in the area of payroll software. And so we're going to talk about search funds, an entrepreneurial story, and saving costs, in particular labor, which despite what industry you're in, labor is often the cost that is the largest on that P&L. So certainly applicable to almost everybody that would be a member of AHA. So very excited about that live session. It will sell out. So once you see the opportunity to pre-register, don't hesitate because we do like to keep them intimate, and we try to have a room of 60, 65. And so obviously that doesn't take long to fill. And so our intention is to have that March, and you should see the information coming out in the new year for the live session. You do need to be a member to get that pre-registration opportunity. Last but not least, Jesse and I have many episodes of our Lively Entrepreneurial Talks out in podcast form. So if you're looking to learn or to listen or to watch, you can certainly participate in Let's and subscribe to that YouTube channel. It's also on Apple and Spotify and any place that you watch or listen to video podcasts. We're really excited about the feedback we've gotten on those sessions. I leave the room every time thinking that we disclosed too much and we were too vulnerable. But the good news is most of the secrets are halfway through the hour, so lots of people don't get that far. So that saves me from being too worried about all of our dirty laundry being out there. We have topics like talent, which is obviously critical. We have topics like startups. We have topics like cash flow, navigating business, and of course, emerging technologies, just to name a few. So please do check that out if you're looking for more learnings and thought leadership in the area of financial strategy and what Amplify does. All right, you've heard enough about Amplify and enough from me. So let's get into it. We've got Vince Fung here to talk about cybersecurity. I was saying to my team, if you knew it and were smart enough yesterday, that has changed today, and it will certainly change tomorrow. That's how quick this is a growing concern for our businesses, and hopefully also an opportunity for you as a business leader and you as a finance leader to help out your organizations and get them practicing those best practices and doing what it takes to differentiate in the market. Cybersecurity is a topic that we take very seriously here at Amplify. in our role as financial strategists, it's absolutely critical that we are doing our best to navigate the circumstances and also be a leader in this area. But we couldn't do that without people like Vince, because we are not IT specialists in regards to cybersecurity, but we are executives and technology experts and accounting experts. And obviously, every one of those people get involved in this area, as does pretty much everyone in every spot within an organization these days. Cybersecurity is no longer just an executive or back office or corporate issue. It hits all areas from field to the corporate office. And so really excited to learn what's happening, Vince, and what we can do to be better as business leaders. So off to you to give a better introduction and to get rolling. Thank you.
All right, let's share my screen here and we'll get things kicked off. All right, thanks so much for the intro there, Jamie. Yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining me this afternoon. I'm super excited to deliver this session to your group. Today, we're going to talk about the 5 shocking truths about cyber attacks and what every business leader needs to know about cyber threats and managing cyber risk. So we're going to talk about quite a few different things today, and I hope you guys all find this presentation to be helpful. Before I get started, a little quick intro about me. I'm Vince Fung. I'm the founder and CEO of Expera Information Technology. Would love to stay in touch with you guys afterwards, so feel free to follow me on Instagram, follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter. Please send a connection request to me on LinkedIn. So I have my QR code up there, so you can scan the code and actually shoot off a connect to actually stay connected with me. And if you have any questions afterwards, I would love to hear from you as well. So shoot off an email to me at vince.fung@experait.com, and I will do my best to help you out with any questions that you might have. Right, so here's my QR code again, and would definitely love to stay connected with you. I do a fair bit of posting on LinkedIn as well about some of the latest threats, the latest hacks, and things that every business leader really needs to think about in terms of staying safe from what's happening in the world today. Before I dive in, let's share a little bit about my company. So my company, as I mentioned, is Expera Information Technology. Some of you may have known us as Debian Information Technology. So we've been around for 27 years. Actually, this is going to be our 28th year in business. We rebranded to Expera back in 2020. So we're now known as Expera Information Technology. So we're a full-service IT managed services company. We do cybersecurity, cloud services with Azure, AWS. We provide 24/7 IT support, business intelligence, strategy, and of course, managed services and managed cybersecurity services is our bread and butter. Mentioned we've been in business. This is our 28th year in business. We are a gold certified Microsoft partner, and we have offices from coast to coast, everything from Vancouver all the way to Cape Breton. We're based in Calgary. That's where our head office. And I am actually between Calgary and Toronto frequently. So between those two cities. So we're, a few things we're pretty proud of. We've won a number of awards over the years. So 7 years, we've been ranked as one of Canada's top 50 best managed IT companies. And we're also ranked globally as one of the top 501 managed service providers around the world. We've also won some awards for fast-growing companies as well, Globe and Mail and Maclean's Magazine. So you're probably wondering, who the heck is Vince Fung and what do I know about protecting Canadian businesses? So I'll share a little bit more background about me. So way back when I was a kid, I was born and raised in Calgary, and I fell in love with computers at the age of 10. My family was gifted a Commodore 64, so we weren't a very well-off family, being an immigrant family, parents from Hong Kong. I was very fortunate that my aunt and uncle actually gave us a Commodore 64, which was my first foray into computers. And I loved computers so much that I ended up going into university at the U of C, doing a degree in electrical engineering and computer science. And while I was still finishing my 4th year of university, I started Expera Information Technology. So our first 3 clients were all Calgary-based energy sector companies. And over the next few decades, the world evolved very quickly. So when I started the company, the internet was really in its infancy. So we had the internet that took off. People relied on email, Blackberries, all that kind of fun stuff. Then we had the cloud revolution as companies started to move off of their infrastructure running on servers inside their offices to the cloud. And of course, today, one of the big things that we deal with is cyber attacks, which is the topic of the presentation today. Things really changed for me a couple of years back. Actually, it was about maybe 4 years ago, that a small family-owned regional airline based in Western Canada phoned me in a panic. What had happened was that they got hit with a massive ransomware attack, and they engaged us to help them recover from it. And I saw firsthand the devastation that it caused. I saw the impact that it had on the customers that were relying on them for travel. I saw the impact on their employees, the impact on the owners of the businesses who had actually spent 52 years building up this company. And after seeing all that and helping them with that situation and essentially sharing the stress and the chaos with them, I realized I had to do something. I realized I had to help businesses stay protected. So I took all the skills I had over the 20 plus years of building my IT company, and I focused on preventing ransomware. Today, I'm invited to speak all across North America, and my mission is really to educate business leaders about cyber risk. We help over 100 businesses across Canada, and we help business leaders in those companies uncover and understand the risk. We help them with strategies to manage and mitigate those risks. And ultimately, we help them stay protected from the latest threats so that they don't fall victim to a potentially business-ending cyber attack. So I've spoken at all kinds of different places. I've been invited to speak at NASDAQ, at the New York City Bar Association. I've spoken at Harvard, a whole bunch of different places. And my mission is to help educate business leaders so that they're actually ready for the inevitable attack, so that they're actually prepared and mitigating the risks to minimize the damage that an attack has so that they can keep their business running and remain viable. So let's get started. What I like to typically share is that even today, with all the news that we see on cyber attacks and all the bad stuff that's happening, the typical approach that a lot of people still take towards their online safety is that they'll take this car that all of you have and drive on the weekends, and you're going to park it in a dark alley. So those of you in Calgary are probably familiar with this five-star hotel known as the Cecil. No longer exists, but you essentially park it behind the alley at the Cecil in a dimly lit area with a whole bunch of unsavory people hanging around. And not only do they actually park the car there, but they're actually leaving the windows rolled down. They're leaving a few $100 bills spread on the front seat, maybe a diamond ring sitting on the dashboard, a Louis Vuitton bag sitting in the back seat, and the "Please Rob Me" sticker on the windshield. Hey, and it's not so much that people are necessarily reckless. It's just that a lot of people don't really fully understand who and what they're up against. And that's what I hope to share with you today is the 5 shocking truths about cyber attacks, where they come from, what to look out for, and the impact they have and what you can do to actually prepare for it. I absolutely love this comic. We licensed this from John Klausner. He actually says, in this corner, we have firewalls, encryption, antivirus, all the greatest security tools needed to keep you safe and protected. And in this corner, we have Dave, aka human error. And what I like to share is that in the majority of cyber attacks, and we're probably talking like 90+%, hackers are not hacking systems, they're hacking people. So they're tricking people to do stuff they're not supposed to. And that's actually what ultimately leads to bad stuff happening to businesses. Hey, and when I talk to business leaders today, especially in small businesses, I still hear, oh, but we're too small. I've got nothing to hide. Nobody would bother to hack us. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people still don't think it's going to happen to them until, of course, it does. And I was meeting with a finance company a little while back, and their IT manager actually said to me, hey, we don't actually have a lot of money. Like all the clearing for our clients and stuff all flow through National Bank. How can they steal something from somebody that's got nothing to steal? Well, I'm going to answer that question for you today as well, as to like, how do these hackers monetize their attacks? And hopefully that actually clears that question up. Ultimately, what's happened today is that a cyber attack has become the #1 business risk, more so than flood, fire, physical break and enter. It's the one thing that could ultimately lead to a business closing their doors forever. Hey, as I actually flow into this presentation, I'm going to share with you a story. This is actually a recent cyber incident. And usually when my phone rings at 5 a.m. in the morning, it's not a great thing. So 5 a.m. in the morning, I got a phone call. This was way back in an October, a little while back. And when I picked up the phone, we were told that this factory had been hit with a massive ransomware attack. So they engaged our incident response team. And when our incident response team arrived on site, what we actually saw at the front door of the business were a whole bunch of employees that a bunch of them looked really distraught. So a bunch of them were giving each other hugs and consoling each other. And I didn't think too much of it at the time. But what we found out afterwards were that these were the hourly employees that worked in the factory, because the factory had gotten completely shut down by the ransomware attack. They had no idea if they were going to have a job to come to the next day. They weren't even sure if they were going to get paid on Friday to cover their mortgage bills and put groceries on the table. It was a pretty big disaster. So we entered the building and we were brought upstairs. We got brought into the big boardroom. And in the boardroom was their VP of Finance, and he had his head buried in his hands. He didn't even look up at us when they introduced us to him. And he was just sitting there, and you could tell that he was extremely distraught. Then we got brought down the hall to the office of the IT manager, and the IT manager was sitting on the floor, and he also had his head buried in his hands. And when they introduced us to him, his only words were, "We are so screwed." So what happened was that they got hit with a massive ransomware attack. Their entire operations was shut down. All their data and their servers were encrypted. The demand for the ransom, $1.4 million. Okay, if you think that's a big amount, in the first 5 months of 2022, Unit 42, which is a incident response team, the average amount of ransom paid was $925,000. So $1.4 million isn't really a lot of money. So this is 925,000 US, which actually translates to almost $1.4 million. So that's a typical ransomware amount that's actually paid today. Depending on your company, it could actually be substantially larger, depending on how big of a business you are and how big of an impact it actually has. So their factory floor had completely ground to a halt. Their accounting system was completely down. Their CRM system was down. They couldn't contact their customers. Their ERP system was down. So they had no idea what was actually on the factory floor, what shipments were coming in, what products needed to ship, what the work in progress was. They had no idea because they were completely dead in the water. And it was a huge disaster. And because they were running a digital control system that ran a lot of their computers that wasn't properly segmented and wasn't properly secured, their control systems were down as well, so that a lot of their machines were completely dead in the water. And worst was their payroll system was down. So those hourly workers that were actually out front, they were actually kind of right, because they had no idea if they were going to get paid because the payroll was down. They couldn't log their hours. Yeah, it was a huge disaster. And their email was also down, meaning that they couldn't even send messages out to their vendors, to their business partners, to their customers to let them know what had happened. So you're probably wondering, how did they end up here? Whose fault was it? Was it their IT team? Well, when we actually did the forensics on it, they actually had pretty good IT folks. Their IT guys were very knowledgeable. They're great at solving problems. They were actually pretty security minded as well, did a pretty good job of following process and documenting things. So couldn't really pin the blame on them. So was it their CFO or the VP of Finance? Well, they actually were allocated a pretty decent IT budget. Like their IT team actually asked for budgets to invest in different things like firewalls. They had spam filtering. Their antivirus was actually working at the time, and it just didn't catch it. So what happened? Well, the unfortunate reality is that they were faced with a bunch of blind spots, right? They didn't know what they didn't know. So that's the biggest risk for executives and for IT people, is we don't know what we don't know. And when the dust settled, when we were able to actually get them mostly back up and running, like their business was severely disrupted. They lost a lot of revenue as a result of this. We were actually brought in and asked, like, how could we have prevented this? How could we have prevented all the disruption, all of the chaos, all of the stress and potential loss of clients, damage to reputation, and all the additional costs to actually recover? Like, not only did they have to pay the ransom, they also had to pay for purchasing new equipment, additional security controls, and also pay for an incident response team including our team, to come in, rebuild systems, decrypt files, negotiate with the hackers, and work to actually recover their factory so that they could actually get back up and running. Okay, and this probably brings up the question, as a business leader, what do you need to know? Okay, and this presentation is about the 5 shocking truths about cyber attacks. So the first truth is that it's unfortunately not a matter of if, but when. It's inevitable. Like, you have a 100% guaranteed chance that you're going to be faced with some sort of cyber incident. In fact, more recently, at most of the security conferences that I'm attending, the new stance is that you've probably already been hacked. You just don't know it yet. So the hackers are probably already in your systems. They just haven't actually detonated their payload yet, so you don't know it. They're probably poking around, copying your data, trying to find the most inopportune time for you to launch the attack that's going to hurt the most, so that you are likely to pay the ransom to get your business back up and running as quickly as you can. So you absolutely have to be prepared for it. So preparation is key to making sure that your business remains cyber resilient. And all of you should be asking the question, are you ready? Okay. Next question that you probably have is, well, why has cybercrime gotten so bad? So that brings me to the second truth, which is cybercrime is a business. Okay, that's the reality. Cybercrime is business, and it's big business. But that doesn't answer, well, how did it get so bad today? Okay, so to answer that question, we have to rewind the clock. So let's rewind the clock a couple hundred years. So way back in the day, if you wanted to get into the business of crime, all you had to do was go to a store and buy a gun or a knife. So with a knife, maybe you hide in a dark alley. When somebody came around the corner, you pull out the knife and say, stick them up. And you'd be able to steal their wallet, their jewelry, their watch, anything of value that they might have had on them. Okay, but similar to the majority of business leaders today, these criminals who are in the business of crime started asking themselves, I wonder how I grow my business. And thanks to technology, trains came along. So they discovered that they could team up with 2 or 3 guys on horseback. They could ride along a steam train in a deserted part of the country, stop the train, and now they could actually rob 200 people or 300 people at a time. So they're getting increased ROI, economies of scale. So technology helped them scale their business. Okay, if you fast forward to today, big red dot in the middle says eBay, 145 million accounts hacked. Okay, at no point in the history of mankind has one person been able to rob 145 million people in one shot. But thanks to technology, that's not only a possibility, it's actually a reality that's happening every single day. Okay, and I get asked the question a lot, like 145 million accounts hacked, like, so what? How much could that possibly be worth to the hackers? To answer that question, we need to understand the internet. Okay, so the internet consists of multiple layers. Okay? All of you are probably familiar with the surface web, which includes things like Google, Bing, Facebook, Instagram, all the legitimate websites and tools that you use. Okay, that's the part of our daily internet. Okay, beneath the internet is actually an area called the deep web, which is still a legitimate part of the internet, but it requires special access. So it might contain academic information, government resources, legal precedents, that type of stuff. And it requires you to be part of a certain organization or have special access in order to gain access to those things. Beneath the deep web is the underbelly of the internet, known as the dark web. So with the dark web, the way that you access the dark web is using a special browser called the Tor browser, Tor, which stands for the Onion Router, which interestingly enough was developed by the US Department of Defense. So the way the Onion Router works is that if you want connecting from one computer to another computer, instead of actually connecting you directly, it actually routes you through sometimes dozens or even hundreds of computers to mask exactly where you're coming from. And often these computers are in different countries, different jurisdictions, making it very difficult for law enforcement to actually trace the origin of the actual connection, and essentially makes it anonymous for people to actually operate. So when people are operating anonymously, they're much more brave and willing to do sometimes illegal things, such as on the dark web, you can actually buy and sell illegal drugs. You can buy and sell stolen weapons like guns. You can actually buy and sell arms like rockets and missiles and tanks and stuff like that. You can even buy and sell organs. And it's also the place where stolen information used in cyber attacks is sold. So if you actually look on the some of the stats on the dark web, stolen information is actually worth a lot of money. So for example, in that eBay hack, the credit card details, which are worth anywhere from $2 to $40, that means that with 145 million accounts compromised, where they stole the credit card numbers, addresses, and other information, the hackers made off with, on the low end of the scale, $300 million. Okay, hackers today are also leveraging other anonymous ways to actually communicate, including Telegram channels. So hackers are actually using this as well. And they're actually more so actually moving to these types of channels because it's also very difficult to trace the connection to carry on their business because it's actually more readily accessible by the general population. Okay, some other reasons why cybercrime has gotten so bad is the popularity of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dogecoin, and various other types of coins, which allow massive amounts of money to be transferred across borders that are almost anonymous. It's not 100% anonymous, but it makes it very difficult to trace and track down. So that's created a haven for criminals. And like, if you imagine like somebody actually ransoms you and says, hey, send me $1.4 million in large bills. That suitcase of money, if you're shipping it over to Ukraine or Russia or wherever the attack is actually happening, it's probably going to get stopped and they're not going to be able to send the money successfully. But with cryptocurrencies, with a few clicks of the mouse, you can transfer literally millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars. And that gets transferred essentially in a way that is very difficult to trace by law enforcement. Okay. And the final reason why cybercrime has gotten so bad is we are more reliant on technology than ever, right? Can you imagine operating your business without access to your computers and servers, your accounting systems? It's almost impossible, right? Like, every business is heavily reliant on on technology to run their business, which means that when it goes down, it has tremendous impact, and business leaders are willing to pay a lot of money to get those systems back up and running. You guys have probably seen in the news recently that Vegas is under attack, right? There was a huge cyber attack that hit Caesars and MGM that essentially took down all of MGM systems. Like, their slot machines went down, their hotel booking system went down, their HVAC systems, the key card access to their hotel rooms went down. Like, literally everything actually went down. Just giving you just a taste of how big of an impact the cyber attack has and how reliant on technology businesses actually are. And most recently in the news yesterday, two Canadian government contractors were actually compromised and a bunch of information was stolen as well. And we'll talk about how hackers use stolen information to monetize these attacks. Hey, next question that likely comes to mind is, who are the bad actors? So who are the guys that are perpetrating these crimes? Hey, when a lot of people think about hackers, they're still thinking about this guy, the pimply teenager in mommy's dark, damp basement, pounding away at the keyboard in the glow of their green monitor. The hackers today, this is not your stereotypical hacker. Okay, and the third truth is that the adversary, the hacker, is very, very sophisticated. The most sophisticated group of hackers operates out of this building. So this building is located just northeast of Shanghai and belongs to the People's Liberation Army, Unit 61398. Every single day, 3,000 people show up to work in this building, and their sole job is to hack into foreign government systems, hack into foreign corporations that have interesting intellectual property, hack into foreign trade organizations, and hack into foreign infrastructures to plant backdoors so that when the next world war breaks out, they're just going to shut down the power grid, shut down the water filtration systems, and actually make life miserable or unattainable for the vast majority of the population of the planet. So since this came out a few years ago, this People's Liberation Army Unit 61398, over 60 countries have openly admitted that they have cyber warfare programs. And we're actually seeing this in play today. even in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and what's actually happening over in the Gaza Strip. So this is the world that we are living in. Hey, another adversary that we're actually up against are people that use crimeware as a service. So crimeware as a service is kind of like software as a service. And most of you are probably familiar with software as a service, like tools like NetSuite, QuickBooks Online, Salesforce. Like all of these are software subscriptions that you actually subscribe to online. You just pay a monthly fee and you get access to it. So the hackers that are really, really good at writing code and know how to exploit systems, they don't want to get their hands dirty. So instead of actually hacking into systems themselves, they're writing the software that will do the hacking, and they're just renting the software out, just like Microsoft does with Microsoft 365. And they're renting it. So for a small monthly fee, any criminal that may not be very sophisticated technologically can actually subscribe to this and actually become a cyber criminal and launch cyber attacks. Okay. There's also ransomware as a service group. So these are groups that actually it's a type of crimeware as a service, and they're actually renting out tools that actually launch ransomware attacks, such as the DarkSide group. Some of these groups are actually sometimes very sophisticated criminals that get together. They might team up for a few months, hack into a bunch of organizations, make a few tens of millions of dollars, and then they'll disband and disappear. So that's one of the adversaries as well. Hey, in fact, it's gotten so interesting out there that there are now criminal venture capital funds. So if you were a criminal that made a whole ton of money back in the day and you didn't want to get your hands bloody anymore, instead of actually doing the dirty work yourself, you just invest in up-and-coming baby criminals that have interesting ideas to hack into systems or hack into people to exploit them. And you just make a cut of whatever they're actually paying. So you're getting passive income. Hey, cyber criminals also include terrorists and extremist organizations. So groups like Al-Qaeda and various terrorist groups also use cyber attacks to generate money to finance their activities. And organized crime groups like the Hells Angels and your typical mafia are also in on being cyber criminals as well to finance their activities, because it's much easier to actually launch these types of attacks to make money and not get caught than it is to physically actually perpetrate some of these crimes. Okay, so that brings me to the fourth truth that I'll share with you today, which is the weakest link is your people. Okay, remember at the beginning of the presentation, I shared with you how hackers don't hack systems, they hack people. So really, to keep your organization safe, you have to develop a culture of security. Okay, so you know how at the airports, and train stations, they sometimes have these announcements. If you see something suspicious, it probably is suspicious, so report it. This is exactly the culture that you have to build in your organization. Is if something doesn't quite look right, it probably isn't right. Report it to somebody so we can investigate and ensure that it's not a cyber attack. Because as a technology team, we can put all kinds of security tools in place, like door locks, cameras, alarm systems, window bars. But really, all it takes is somebody that's accidentally leaving a door open or a second floor window open where there's a step ladder leaning up against the fence, or forgetting to lock the padlock, and the criminals are potentially in. So what exactly is it we're up against? Well, there's so many types of cyber attacks and cyber crime and different things that are actually happening in our world that it might actually seem daunting. Like I've actually heard people like just throw their hands in the air and say, like we have no chance. So what's the point? Well, the important thing is that there are really two types of cyber attacks that are the most common, right? So the first is a ransomware attack where they encrypt all your systems and they're asking for money to actually get the key to decrypt. And the second is known as business email compromise, which is where they actually trick somebody into actually giving up their password. They'll log into their email, and then they'll use their email to try and trick people to pay bills or transfer funds into the hacker's account instead of their own account. The bulk of these business email compromise attacks actually start with a phishing scam. Okay, so spam, which is essentially what a phishing scam is a type of, is still the number one driver of big breaches today. I get asked by people all the time, like, well, we have a spam filter. Why can't the spam filter save me? Well, the spam filters are about 99.9% effective. So they block the vast majority of them. But if the hacker's sending you thousands of pieces of spam, it's almost impossible to block all of it. Something is going to get through, and it's actually becoming more and more difficult to block spam because you guys have seen over the last year the explosion of artificial intelligence, tools like ChatGPT and other types of AI engines. The hackers are actually using these. In the past, they would actually craft an email message and then they'd send the same message out to tens of thousands of people. Now with AI, what they can actually do is craft the message, and they'll actually tell AI, send out 100,000 variations of this. Every single one of them is going to be slightly different, which makes it almost impossible for a spam filter to actually block it. So that's the world that we're actually up against today. So how do you identify different types of phishing scams? So this is an example of something that looked like it came from Microsoft. It says that, hey, your passcode needs to be reset. So to analyze this message, how do you tell if it's real or fake? Well, first of all, the email address doesn't work. It doesn't match. So it's actually coming from like ilit.com, which doesn't match the contents of the email. The second thing is you can hover over top of the link. So I want to really reinforce the point. You can hover over top of it, but do not click the link, because clicking the link could often lead to something that's really bad that could happen. Okay, so when you hover over top of the link, it's going to show, like this particular email, it went to specsavers.com, which has nothing to do with Microsoft or the company name. So this is how you can actually tell if an email is actually fake or not. In the last couple of months, we're actually starting to see a type of attack known as a quishing attack, which is actually where hackers are using QR codes. And instead of just sending like a message that says, click on this link to reset your password or do whatever, they're actually telling you to scan the QR code on your phone. And the hackers are doing this for several reasons. The first is that it makes it a bit easier for it to bypass a spam filter, because the majority of spam filters, even today, are not able to detonate a QR code link to actually test to see if it's malicious or not. And the second thing is it actually takes the access to the hacker's phishing site off of a managed device. So typically, if you're doing this on a company computer, you're going to have like antivirus tools and other security tools on it. But by tricking you into scanning a QR code, what they're actually doing is they're making you actually detonate that link on your smartphone, which doesn't typically have the same controls and the same protection as your work computer, which allows the hackers to do more bad things. Okay, not all phishing scams are obvious though, right? Like this one actually came from John Gilligan. I've changed the name, but this came from somebody that I actually know, came from their legitimate email account, and it contains a link to an investment proposal. Then click here for it. So in this case, the email address is actually real. And if you were to hover over top of the link, it's also very difficult to tell because it's taking you to a file on Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive or wherever. And this is where hackers typically place ransomware, so that it, instead of actually sending it through the spam filter, which will most likely get blocked, it's tricking you into actually downloading the file from a legitimate file sharing site, bringing that into your network and launching the attack that way, right? So most likely contains malware or some type of ransomware if you were to actually click on it. So if you're ever in doubt, just don't click on it. The only way that you can really tell if something is real or not, like this message, is, are you actually expecting an investment proposal from John Gilligan? If not, probably a scam, right? So if in doubt, don't click, because if you were to click, here are some of the things that could happen. So it could take you to a phishing site that steals your password, which then compromises your email, which then the hackers could actually email all of your contacts, which is what happened to John Gilligan there. Sent an email to all of his contacts that contained a link to a malware attack, typically a ransomware attack. So if in doubt, do not click. Contact your IT help desk, because your IT help desk would be delighted to actually look at an email with you if you're not sure, rather than spending like months of sleepless nights trying to rebuild systems and wondering if they still have a job or not. So when in doubt, contact your IT help desk and speak to them. Another type of attack, which is a variation of a phishing attack, is known as spear phishing. So spear phishing is also known as a whaling attack, and this is a type of attack that's very targeted, okay, because generally it contains contextual information. So the hacker will usually pick some companies to try and exploit, and they're picking these companies by random, right? They're not going through any type of specific selection criteria. They're just picking them randomly, and they're doing a bit of research on the company. So they might look at their LinkedIn page to see what information they have, any press releases you might have shared on their website, might research some employees, and they might actually start this attack off with a phishing scam to trick one or more employees to give up their password. Then they'll log into that email, look around in their email to see if there's anything interesting in there, and then they'll actually launch the real attack. And because they've done research on it, they can craft these attacks to look really genuine because it contains information that you think is like very specific to your organization, right? And as I mentioned earlier, these types of attacks are typically there to commit wire fraud, which is to trick you into transferring money into the hacker's account. So perhaps the most famous attack in Canada is the MacEwan University attack, where MacEwan University transferred almost $12 million into the hacker's account. So what happened here was the hackers actually discovered that, hey, MacEwan University has a bunch of construction projects on campus. Who's working on these construction projects? Well, it happened to be Clark Builders. So what they did was they decided to craft an attack that made it look like an email came from Clark Builders from their accounts receivable department and sent it to MacEwan University's accounts payable department. And the message actually essentially said, hey, we've changed our banking information. Please pay all future invoices to this new bank account. So 3 separate people at MacEwan University looked at that email, and there was a phone number in that email as well saying, hey, if you have any questions, please call me. And one of the people from MacEwan University phoned the phone number that was in that email. And because it came from the hackers, that phone number wasn't the real phone number for Clark Builders. It was actually the phone number for the hacker. So they phoned, talked to the hacker. The hacker actually said, yeah, that's all legit. Please update your banking information. So they went ahead and they paid 3 invoices totaling $11.8 million to the hackers. And it was a few weeks later, Clark Builders actually reached out and phoned somebody at MacEwan saying, hey, why haven't you paid your invoices yet? And the accounts payable people there said, what do you mean? We paid them. And then they discovered that they had actually transferred the money into the hacker's account. So they don't always target big organizations. Like McKnight Hockey Association in Calgary was also scammed out of $98,000. Somebody pretended to be the treasurer, somebody pretended to be a board of director member, sent a message to the treasurer saying, hey, we've made a decision on the investment fund. Please transfer $98,000 into this account, which they did. And it ended up in the hacker's hands. The amounts are also not always big, right? Some of the small attacks include iTunes gift card scams, where they're actually tricking people into going out buying iTunes gift cards for a few $100s to a couple $1,000s, tricking them to scratch off the codes, email the codes to the hackers, and they redeem the cards, and they're making money. So in some countries, like in India or some of those places, a couple $1,000s is almost the entire annual income, right? So it's a lot of money to those guys, but it doesn't seem like a big amount, and that's why they're perpetrating these scams. There's also payroll direct deposit scams. So during COVID, we actually saw a lot of these attacks where people were pretending to be employees and actually emailing the HR department or the finance department, telling them that they've updated their banking information and to change the bank accounts. More recently, we're actually seeing Ceridian actually getting spoofed as well, where hackers are pretending to send out messages from Ceridian to try and steal the user's passwords. And once they've stolen the Ceridian password, the hackers are logging in using the Ceridian account and updating the payment information so that the payroll gets deposited into their accounts. So this type of stuff is happening as well. Also important that I point out that not all of these scams are just about money, right? Some of these spear phishing attacks are actually trying to steal confidential information. So things like confidential payroll records. So it was actually a few years back now that somebody pretended to be the CEO of Snapchat, and they sent a message that looked like it came from the CEO, and it went to the somebody that was actually new in the HR department, saying that, hey, I need you to do something for me. Please put all of the executive salaries into a spreadsheet for me. We're reevaluating the bonuses, and I need that information. So this person actually went in and typed out this beautiful spreadsheet and emailed it out to the hackers. And once the hackers got it, they went back to Snapchat and said, hey, we have all of your executive compensation details. If you don't want us to release this publicly, you got to pay us a few $100,000. So Snapchat actually refused. So if you want to find out how much all the executives make, it's all public information now. Corporate secrets, like any intellectual property, client lists, secret formulations, all that type of stuff. Hackers are actually trying to steal this information to actually extort money from your organization, threatening to sell information to your competitors or to post information publicly. And that's how they monetize these types of attacks. So the only way to really protect your organization against this stuff is to have good security controls in place to ensure that you're actually authenticating employees that are actually asking for information, or authenticating vendors or customers to make sure that any request is actually legitimate before you actually execute on it. So any type of sensitive information, we suggest you call or see the person directly. Call them on a known phone number. Do not trust email. Do not trust messages on Teams, because hackers can actually hack into the Microsoft 365 account and actually send Teams messages that look like they came from that employee. And these attacks are getting more and more sophisticated. So there are now tools like deepfake. There's a did.io, which you can pay for $40 a month, that will actually fake anybody's voice or fake video that makes that person look and talk exactly like that person, using artificial intelligence. So make sure you authenticate transactions. Don't fall victim to extortion. Okay. Not all phishing attacks are actually using email. So there's smishing attacks, which are attacks being sent via SMS messages. So if you get a link via SMS message, just don't click on it, because it's bad news. Okay, and of course, hackers are still using the telephone as well. So they're phoning potential victims, trying to trick them to do things as well, which is actually, interestingly enough, how the hackers got into MGM. So what had happened there was that somebody was pretending to be a higher level senior technician at MGM, and they phoned and essentially bullied the help desk staff member to reset their password, which allowed the higher level employee's account to be compromised by the hackers, which then got them into the system and across all of MGM systems, essentially shutting them down. So that's those are some of the things to watch out for in terms of spam and phishing and spear phishing attacks. Okay, I just want to spend a few minutes and just talk a little bit about passwords. Okay, the password that you have for different systems is the identity. So it's the one thing. It's the one thing that separates you from legitimately accessing a resource versus a hacker getting unauthorized access. It's your username and password. So how do hackers typically get passwords? Well, they could potentially guess passwords. So a lot of people still use bad passwords like QWERTY or PASSWORD1. Those are really bad passwords, and hackers actually try those first. And if they can get in, great, they just got in. Okay, they could also be using a brute force attack. So we used to actually set password limits as you have to have a password 8 characters or longer. Well, an 8-character password literally takes a split second for a hacker to actually try all possible combinations of. So we typically now recommend passwords that are 15 to 20 characters in length. And I'll talk more about passwords and how to choose good passwords in a few slides. They could be actually using a phishing attack, like that fake Microsoft email or fake PayPal email that tricks you into actually typing in your password. They could be using a stolen password list. So when hackers actually hack into different sites, like what happened with Best Buy and LinkedIn a little while back, they steal the entire password database. And now they have all the email addresses and passwords that are used, which means that if you use the same password for more than one site, the hackers have potentially gotten the keys to get into everything that uses that password combination. You could also use a compromised computer. Maybe you installed malware like a keylogger on there, or it could be a man-in-the-middle attack. Like if you use free public Wi-Fi, it's fairly common that in different countries at airports and hotels and coffee shops that hackers are setting up fake Wi-Fi access points that intercept traffic that allows them to steal information. And of course, passwords are also for sale on the dark web. So after hackers steal passwords, they'll actually sell them on the dark web. So other hacking groups can buy those lists and use those to perpetrate further attacks. So some tips on passwords: use strong passwords. As I mentioned, choose a password that's 15 to 20 characters in length. And some of you are probably thinking, wow, that's absolutely crazy. How the hell am I going to remember a 20-character password? Well, it's actually fairly easy. Use a passphrase. So pick a sentence that doesn't make any sense, such as, today the sky sounds pink. Sentence doesn't completely make sense, but it's easy to type. Replace a couple letters with uppercase letters, tack on a few numbers in the middle and a symbol or two. And now the password is very, very difficult for a hacker to actually guess. Okay. Don't write passwords on sticky notes. So if you need to share a password, don't write down a password. Use a secure means of sharing passwords, which is using a password manager. So password managers like Dashlane, 1Password, Keeper Security, like those ones are all very, very high-end password managers that are very secure, that allow you to actually securely store your passwords and share them with other people in your organization in a secure manner. And as I mentioned before, if a hacker actually hacks into one system and steals your password and you use the same password somewhere else, they've just gotten into everything that uses that password. So use different passwords for everything. Okay. And with a password manager, you can actually do that very easily, because the password manager will typically tell you, hey, you're reusing this password in multiple sites. Bad idea. Please change these passwords. And then you can go through and actually change the passwords. We also get asked, like, what about changing your password regularly? So there are a few schools of thought here. If your company requires PCI compliance, in order to be PCI compliant, you have to change your password every 90 days, right? So that's still a requirement based on some security standards. But Microsoft, over the last few years, has actually said that if you have multi-factor authentication turned on, you don't have to change your password. So that's on the other extreme end of the scale. Our stance is that we suggest that you change your password periodically, like maybe once a year, once every 6 months, just in case that password got leaked somehow, right? Maybe through a man-in-the-middle attack or something, where in case that password gets leaked, at least you're resetting a password periodically, so that if the password's out there for sale or falls into the wrong hands, after a certain period of time, the password has been changed and your account remains secure. What about multi-factor authentication? Well, multi-factor authentication is actually where instead of just having a username and password, you actually need to have an additional code on your authenticator app on your phone, or maybe a text message that's where a 6 or 8 digit code is texted to you or emailed to you before you can actually log in. So by using multi-factor authentication, it actually makes it much more difficult for hackers to actually get in, because it requires not just username and password, but also the code that's on the device. But keep in mind that multi-factor authentication is not totally perfect, because a lot of people have multi-factor authentication now enabled, which makes it so now they're coming up with attacks that actually exploit that as well. So it's not perfect, but it definitely makes it much harder for them to get in. Okay, so that leads me to the final truth, which is that if you're relying on your IT guys to keep you safe, the unfortunate reality is that security tools are just a small piece of the solution, right? Because defense is really hard. The threat that we're facing is asymmetrical, right? For us on the defense side of things, we have to get everything right every single time. For the bad guys, they just have to get it right once, and they're potentially through a layer of security, which is why we suggest actually having multiple layers of security in place. Okay, so to stay safe, we have to remember that cyber criminals are in the business of crime. Okay, what that means is that you don't have to invest billions of dollars in security, because even the US Department of Defense and the Canadian government and large organizations invest many millions to billions of dollars in protecting themselves, and they still get hacked, right? You just have to remember that you have to just throw enough roadblocks in place that the criminals move on to a better victim. So it's kind of like the criminals that are walking down the street trying to see which cars are unlocked or who left their front door unlocked in their house. Like if you have a highly secure front door, you have a fence in front, you got a camera, an alarm system, and a pit bull tied up in your front yard, they're probably going to move on to the next victim. Like, could they get in if they really wanted to? Yeah, probably, but they're looking to make money, and they're not looking to invest a lot of time into breaking into something that's going to destroy their return on investment. Okay. The other thing that you have to also unfortunately have to remember is that it's not a matter of if, but when. So you have to be prepared for a cyber attack. So even with the right security tools, which are still very important, like tools like having an intelligent firewall, making sure that your systems are encrypted to protect your data, having a multi-tiered backup solution, having some form of antivirus software. So I want to point out that antivirus software is obsolete, right? So antivirus software in its original form is no longer sufficient. So today's tools are advanced security tools, right? I talked about how you have to have multiple layers of security so that if a hacker gets through one layer, they can hopefully get blocked by another layer that you have in place. Okay, so the replacement for antivirus is tools that are known as managed detection and response, extended detection and response. So these are all tools that are powered by artificial intelligence that are not looking at different files like the old school antivirus. Like they're actually looking at the behaviors of what's happening on the system and identifying behaviors that are consistent with a cyber attack and blocking those. Spam filters today, all great spam filters are powered by artificial intelligence. So they're constantly learning and looking for new attack vectors. Your business should have advanced threat hunting and hacker foothold detection tools. And one of the most important tools that every business should have in place, if your IT team hasn't talked to you about this, have a conversation about it, because this is the number one most important tool that you can actually put in place to protect your business. And that's application whitelisting, which is based on the zero trust methodology, which means that everything is blocked from running on your system except for those that are explicitly allowed. Okay. And what this allows you to do is it actually ensures that if a hacker actually gets a file in the system or somebody tries to open up a file that is malicious, it's just going to get blocked because it's not whitelisted, right? So it prevents probably 99.999% of cyber attacks from happening if it's set up, configured, and managed properly. Okay, another critical tool that every business must have in place today, because it's not a matter of if, but when, is a security information event manager that actually logs what is going on the system, so that when you actually discover there's a cyber attack, you have information to go back to identify what did the hackers do, when did they get in, how did they get in, and what you need to do to actually clean it up, what data they might have stolen. Like all that information is actually logged in tools like a security information event manager or SIM tool, so that your business is actually ready for forensics when an attack happens. And another tool that you're probably going to see gain substantial popularity is if you are a hybrid workplace environment, or we have people working remotely or in a virtual work environment, Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE, is a very important tool that your business should consider. Okay, so in order to secure a business, it's not just the tools. You can't just set it and forget it. Like you have to do a lot of preventative maintenance work. You have to actually make sure that systems are patched, security updates are actually put in place. You have to make sure that systems are monitored to make sure the security tools are working properly, and that if there is a security alert, that it's actually dealt with in a timely manner. You should be monitoring the dark web as well to see if any stolen information or credentials about your business is being made for sale there. And all of these things need to be in place. And ultimately, it comes down to actually creating and managing a security program, part of which is actually the responsibility of the IT team. But more importantly, it's actually part of the executive team and the board to actually ensure that this is in place. So effective risk management is around governance, risk, and compliance. So I don't like the order of this, because really you should be actually looking at risk first, then putting in the governance piece in place to actually mitigate those risks, and then checking for compliance. So first thing you need to do is understand the risk, performing a risk assessment so that you understand what risks your business faces. In simple terms, it's figuring out what sort of things could actually hurt your business and what role does technology actually play in that? So identifying that, and then putting in the governance, which are any compliance requirements that you have, any security controls that need to be in place. So these are typically policies and procedures. And then the final piece is actually the security controls, which is the technology piece of it, to make sure that if somebody actually does something or tries to do something they're not supposed to, that it will hopefully block it or alert somebody to ensure that not too much damage is actually done. So every business should actually be verifying that the layers of security that they've invested in is actually working properly. So almost every company now invests in some form of security. The question is it set up properly? Did a technician accidentally turn off something? Is it still working the way it's supposed to, right? And really, you need to actually audit and assess your security controls on a regular basis to ensure that your investment in security is actually doing its job, right? So you also should be investing in cyber awareness training, making sure that your employees are trained at least on a monthly basis. We recommend more on a quarterly basis now, and also having weekly short training updates to ensure that cybersecurity remains top of mind for everybody. Your organization should be running phishing simulation testing, at least on a quarterly basis, if not on a monthly basis, to see who is susceptible. You might also want to see social engineering testing to see who is susceptible to being tricked, doing something that they're not supposed to. And finally, you need to prepare for the adverse event. Remember, it's not a matter of if, but when. And the direction that most security folks are leaning towards is you've probably already been compromised. You just haven't had the payload detonated yet. So really, you should be prepared for when it happens, and that's through an incident response plan, right? I mentioned it's not a matter of if or when. And when they interviewed, VentureBeat actually interviewed a bunch of C-suite executives. 63% of those C-suite executives said they don't have an incident response plan, right? And we still see this in the vast majority of organizations is when an incident happens, they're scrambling to try and figure out who the incident response team is. Like, who do we need to call? Who's responsible for it? How do we actually communicate with the key stakeholders? How do we communicate with employees, customers, vendors? Do we have a virtual muster point? Like if your network is compromised and your Microsoft 365 is compromised, you can no longer rely on that to actually communicate because the hackers are watching all that communication. So where do you move that communication to allow your business to continue to function or allow communication to happen during the incident response? And even with an incident response plan, it's great that you have a plan, but you have to practice that plan at least on an annual basis with all the key stakeholders through tabletop exercises to identify if the plan is still actually working, if anything has changed. And it's a really critical part of it, right? And you have to keep that plan up to date. Okay, if you don't have a cyber insurance policy, I urge you to talk to your broker because cyber incidents are very, very expensive, right? Like the last one that we were actually called in to assist with incident response, it was a law firm, and within the first week, they had already spent $54,000, right? And they're still trying to do the forensics to figure out if data got leaked, if they have to pay fines. These attacks can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars very, very quickly. So having a cyber insurance policy in place is a really important part of your strategy, but it's also the last line of defense, right? Like we're hoping that all of the other layers that you put in place will actually block the attacks and minimize the damage so that you don't have to make a cyber insurance claim. But if you have to, this is your last line of defense. And a question I like to actually raise out there is, if you're the finance executive or the business leader that's making a decision around whether or not to have a cyber insurance policy and you get hit with a massive attack and you don't have the money to actually pay for it out of your operating budget, are you actually negligent for not having a cyber insurance policy? So think about that. Okay, ultimately, nobody can guarantee that a breach is not going to happen. Cybersecurity has a lot of moving pieces, right? One of my favorite quotes is from Andy Grove, and he actually says, "Success breeds complacency, complacency breeds failure, only the paranoid survive." So if you want to know what state your company is in. If you want to know if you're going to survive a cyber attack, if you're curious to understand if your security layers are actually working, if you want to know if you're absolutely secure, there's a whole bunch of different pieces that you have to understand, right? Mature security posture is around security, compliance, having an insurance policy, and oversight. And the oversight piece is the piece that's missing in almost every organization, because unless you actually have a full-time chief security officer that's looking at things and ensuring all the moving pieces are there, you probably don't have somebody that's looking at the right things. The vast majority of companies are relying on their IT team to proofread their own work, right? So they're the ones that are deciding, hey, we think that this is insecure. We put the security layer. We think the organization is safe, but are you relying on them to actually check and truly understand if you are secure or not? Our belief is even the best IT teams need help. So here's what we can actually do for you is, if you're interested, we have a risk assessment and a security analysis that we can perform. So if you actually Google what it costs to run a professional penetration test, it's generally between 10 to 30,000 US dollars to actually run a penetration test, right? So a full penetration test to understand your state of security one time is going to cost you about average $20,000. Okay. We have a cybersecurity risk assessment that we can assist you with that identifies critical assets, analyzes your risk, performs an internal pen test, external vulnerability scan, performs analysis on your Microsoft 365. Typically, we actually do these for about $7,500. But as being a member of Amplify Advisors and being a part of this group and attending the webinar, we actually work with a third party to actually perform a bunch of this analysis. So we, as an IT provider, we don't assess our own security because we know that we're a high value target and we can't proofread our own work. So we engage another organization that does regular security analysis on us, provides threat intelligence, assesses our security controls on a regular basis. And as part of our relationship with this group, we typically get several of these every month. We've purchased a bunch of extra ones this month because we were assisting a number of organizations. So I actually have six of these available. If you're interested in us performing the risk assessment with you and the cybersecurity analysis, please register. You can go to experait.com/aha, or you can scan the QR code, sign up for it, and we'll actually get you scheduled in for the risk assessment. If you are not ready for a risk assessment, we also have a security guide for business leaders. So you can download that guide by going to this link, which is experait.com/checklist, or you can scan this QR code as well, and you can get a copy of that. So if you want the security analysis, go to experait.com/aha. And if you want the checklist, go to experait.com/checklist. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. I want to thank all of you guys for joining me today. And I think we have a few minutes left for any questions that you might have.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We do have a couple questions. So one of the questions came up about your advice to monitor the dark web. So curious about how someone would actually do that.
So to monitor the dark web, so as part of our actually core basic security tool set, we actually have a dark web monitoring tool where we get alerts. So we actually set up your company, so like amplifyadvisors.com, and it actually looks every night to see if something that's from Amplify Advisors is actually being made for sale. And as soon as it sees something, we actually get alerted to it so that we can notify the affected user so they can change their passwords. Okay. So there are services out there. If anybody's actually interested in a dark web report, I can actually run a one-time report for you, for your organization. Just shoot off an email to me at vince.fung@experait.com, and I can actually run a report for you. Perfect.
So there's reports available from managed service providers, and some managed service providers would have the technology built into the security monitoring that they're doing on a regular basis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So that's worth having a chat and double checking if you're covered on that for sure. Someone's asking if cookies are a cyber threat. So I guess the question is, when we all have to accept the cookies, should we be hesitant on that when we're the ones that initiated visit to that website, etc.?
Yeah. So cookies are actually a critical part of a web page, a website's functionality. So a cookie itself is not necessarily a cyber threat. How the cookie is used could be a cyber threat, right? So it's more around privacy. So when a website actually sets a cookie on your site, on your computer after you visited the site, the cookie can actually be used to potentially track how frequently you're coming back to that site. Some of the cookies are also contain information that allows you to stay signed into a website, right? So hackers, in some of these attacks, I talked about how hackers are bypassing MFA. So one way that hackers bypass MFA is by stealing the cookie that was saved on your computer that keeps you signed into a website and putting that on a different computer. And then they actually bypass the login altogether because the cookie is authenticating you to that site already. So the cookie itself is not necessarily a cyber threat. It's how the cookie is actually used could be used in malicious ways.
Right. Not to mention the fact that then you're going to get chased with the product and probably end up having a wallet threat because you'll spend too much money. We have one of the members told an abbreviated story about how they were in the middle of a deal, and the seller and the CFO got hacked, and then the hacker mimicked the seller CFO's data room and opened, and so a link got sent for a due diligence file from the data room, or that's the way it was presented and perceived, and then the hacker got control of the data room. I think that story is interesting in the sense that when you're working with externals on ad hoc projects or assignments, obviously you can let your guard down, and to some degree these can be expected links that you're actually waiting for, and etc. So how do you prevent, obviously it's one thing to set things up on the reoccurring parts of your business, and hopefully we all see the value in investing and spending the time on the reoccurring parts. But these hackers, as you described and discussed, are very good at finding those ad hoc, unusual spots in your business and going after those because you're more vulnerable. So what's your perspective on preventing that type of incident?
To prevent those types of incidents, really it's kind of assessing how the transactions actually happen, and then actually putting additional authentication steps in place. So in that data room, I'm not sure how, I don't have the details of how did the hackers actually monetize the attack. Did they actually try to trick somebody into changing banking information to transfer money?
Sounds like it was more of a harassment where they left a presence in the data room. So I don't know that there was any money consequences in the long run, but
yeah. So I probably have to look at to understand what happened there in more details, because hackers today are generally not just there to harass people, like they're there to make money. So there's some play in there where they're trying to actually extort money. So maybe they actually stole the data in the data room is a possibility.
Right.
And they're going back.
There would be obviously some pretty critical data room for sure. And I think that raises a good point of, if you can't figure out how big your threat is or incident is, it kind of comes back to that old saying of following the money, right? And figuring out what their objective is, which can help you understand what your exposure and risk is from an incident or a weakness, right?
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. So one of the things that you brought up a couple of times was MFA, and obviously the multi-factor authentication isn't foolproof because nothing is. But I still get the impression that you would strongly suggest that it is a tool that's relied on and expected within an organization. So how can we detect if our MFAs aren't working or are at risk?
So like the most common system that's getting attacked with MFA is Microsoft 365, right? So if you have the right license for Microsoft 365, there's some settings that there's a thing called conditional access that should be turned on. So conditional access is a key piece of it. Another thing is actually to set some rules for lockouts of risky accounts. So Microsoft's pretty intelligent. Like there's a lot of AI built into it if you're subscribed to the right Azure identity license or Entra ID license, where if it actually sees that like you're logging in from here on a regular basis and suddenly there's a log on somewhere else, it'll actually ask for more information to authenticate you. Or if it's actually seeing that you just logged on from here and an hour later you're logged on from the other side of the world, it flags that as this is an impossible logon. What's going on here? And it'll actually you can set rules to block the account. Using a SIEM tool that I talked about, Security Information Event Manager, actually provides even more advanced detection of this, because the SIEM tool actually is not just one system. It actually ties across, like if you have Salesforce, on-premises servers, other cloud services, with the right SIEM tool, you can actually aggregate security data from all of these different sources. And it uses AI to sift through them to look for patterns that just don't look right and detect like an account that's insecure.
And so a couple times you made the comment of right license, but what is the right license?
So the right license is so it's with Microsoft, you have to have at least an Azure Active Directory P1 license is the minimum, which is part of the licensing. People spend an hour talking about licensing, but if you're part of if you have a Microsoft 365 Business Premium, not the Office 365, but the Microsoft 365 Business Premium, you have the right license. If you have a Microsoft 365 E3, then you have the right license, because it's actually included in that.
Right. Okay.
And Microsoft's constantly changing their license types and names as well. So 6 months from now, it could be called something totally different. Like even Azure Active Directory is actually now called Entra ID. So they completely changed the name. So
okay. Lots to keep up with for
yes.
Sure. Okay, so you mentioned a bit about the cell phones and in particular that if a link is set through SMS that you're not expecting not to click on it. But I think, sometimes organizations or employees spend a lot of time doing the right thing when they're sitting at their desk. But the reality is that you're not sitting at your desk in your job as much as you used to. And sometimes we neglect to know that we're safe and it's transferable to our phone. So just want to focus a bit. And I know you mentioned some, so happy to have them repeated. But, how do we make sure we're safe on our phone with the same level of diligence to prevent employee and human error as we are putting that effort into our desktop when we're sitting at our desk?
Yeah, great question. So to secure phones, the vast majority of organizations are not properly managing their phones because it's expensive to set up. It's also fairly invasive because most organizations have shifted to a bring your own device type policy. So there's a little bit of conflict there with employees that are using their personal devices, and then you wanting to install security tools that could potentially see their behavior on their smartphone. So that's one of the most complicated pieces to actually sort out, would be the policy around bring your own device. If you get past that hurdle, then the next step is actually using a mobile device management tool to actually manage the device's security settings and putting security tools that are similar to what you'd actually have on a desktop or laptop computer that's managed by the company. So there are antivirus tools for or managed detection and response tools for smartphones. There's web and DNS filtering for smartphones. Like all those tools are actually there too. But there is a cost to all of those.
Right. And so you spoke a bit about, one of the examples being if you're using the right Microsoft licensing, that it would potentially detect, if you're across the world trying to log in. But would that include if someone across the world is logging in on a mobile? Like what I'm asking, I guess, is does it detect patterns regardless of what you use to log in?
Yeah, so it uses AI to analyze your historic data,
Right.
and if it sees something that's unusual, it'll actually pop up. If you actually set the rules to block risky or suspicious logons, that person would probably get shut out of their account until they can actually reach out to IT and actually unblock them. So it's again, it's kind of a business choice whether is it the convenience or the level of security that you're actually looking for. And like our suggestion is to just let your users know that this might happen, and if it does happen, just reach out to the IT help desk, and they can unblock your account.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've been hearing about, and I don't know how frequent it is, so I'm curious to know your perspective, but it certainly makes for a good discussion because it's scary, is the idea of employees, mimicking a cyber hack. So in some ways, by definition, it may or may not be an actual cyber hack because they're legitimately in the systems, but it's mimicking a cyber hack and looks and feels like a cyber hack. And when the incident happens, it's at first, at least, it's assumed to be a cyber hack, and then depending on how detailed the investigation is, may or may not uncover that it's an employee. So my question is, employee theft or fraud that is mimicking and appearing to be cyber theft, is that like a thing that we should be worried about, or is it just a thing that makes for a good story?
Short answer is yes. It is something that businesses need to be aware of. So if you have time for a quick story, I'll
Yeah.
talk about this company called American Semiconductor. So American Semiconductor is actually a chip manufacturer and a software vendor based in the US. And I think this happened about 5 or 6 years ago. They manufacture the microchips and the software that runs the big like wind generation, those big wind farms. So American Semiconductor had a contract for tens of millions of dollars to sell and license their technology to Sinovel, which is a state-owned manufacturer of these actual windmills in China. So about a year into the agreement, Sinovel suddenly canceled the contract. Hey, we don't need this anymore. So just American Semiconductor's stock price crashed as a result of losing that deal. And they did an investigation, and they actually found out that somehow Sinovel had gotten a hold of the blueprints for the chips and the source code for the software. So they're wondering, how the hell did this happen? And the FBI got involved because it was actually like a state-owned company, and it was like potentially a national intelligence threat. So the U.S. government actually, through its investigation, actually discovered that how they got a hold of this information was through one of their employees. And I believe the guy's name was Dejan Karabasevic. He's in prison now. But Sinovel had actually hired people to actually research to find an employee that was exploitable at American Semiconductor. And they found Dejan because he was recently divorced, had a bit of a gambling problem. So he actually owed a lot of money, and he really liked Chinese women. So they actually went and approached him and offered him pretty big check to pay off his debts. They offered him unlimited access to beautiful Asian women, and he went in there and actually stole the information and gave it to Sinovel. So that is actually how insider threats actually potentially happen, is through people that have become desperate. That's one way. Another way is actually just getting tricked and just not people not knowing that they're actually helping somebody, right? Like you hear about like if you watch, there's a show on Netflix that talks about spies. Like there's a history of actually people actually getting into relationships with people, making them fall in love with them, and actually tricking them to actually steal information for the like this kind of stuff it's an unfortunate reality.
Right. It's as
Yeah.
old as time, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's important to think about, because a lot of the controls that we put in place as a business would do nothing if you're not hiring and training the right people and and paying attention inside, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question I have is, you mentioned you had a big like line through antivirus security software, and I thought that that would be worth raising because it's funny because I recently bought a new computer, and I put on the Amplify, whatever, I don't even know what we're supposed to call it anymore. I used to call it antivirus software, but I did get told in the last month that that's not appropriate naming of the software that we use. So it's funny that you're bringing this up. It's timely. So whatever it is that we use, I put it on, but then because it's a new computer, it keeps trying to sell me this antivirus, right? And so the computer itself keeps trying to sell me and telling me to accept the risk. It's driving me nuts. But so I guess, antivirus software, both for, because every business leader and finance leader that's on this call has their own home computer too. So to some degree, this is more of a question for them to take home to their households than the work, because work would obviously tell them what software to use, and they may or may not be part of that decision making or that team. But for home, should you be purchasing that antivirus software that is being sold to you when you buy the laptop and it's popping up in the right hand corner, or should you be putting on something else? Like, what's the right thing? And let's be honest, as an employee, the vast majority of people in today's world, they're going to log into their personal computer and do work on it, right? They're not, very few people separate their personal devices and computers from their work, as you alluded to with the cell phone discussion. It's not different with a laptop, I don't think, from what I've seen. So what should they be putting on their work computer? And for those of you with Amplify, you're supposed to put the Amplify stuff on every computer you use. Doesn't matter how many there are, but that's not everyone's policy, right? Not every organization's even willing to fund that. So what should they be doing?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's one of the biggest risks that a lot of organizations have is people actually using unmanaged computers to access the corporate network, because the unmanaged computer actually may not have the right antivirus tools. So that when you buy a new computer from like a consumer store like Best Buy or Staples, the consumer grade computers, they're funded by some of these software manufacturers like Norton and McAfee. So they actually pay the manufacturer money to actually install the free version of this consumer grade antivirus software on there. Our stance is that the consumer grade antivirus is really not sufficient. Generally, it tends to slow the computer down substantially, and it doesn't have the like artificial intelligence based protection that you would actually get from the better products. Like rather than like recommending specific brands of software, I would say that you should probably talk to your IT team and see what their recommendation is. I'm happy to hear that Amplify actually has a policy where if you're actually using a home computer to access the corporate network, to install the Amplify security tools, because that is actually a policy that should be in place in every organization. But there's a cost to the organization of doing that, and it also increases overhead of the IT team of managing it as well, because now they're not just managing company-owned computers, but potentially home user computers as well. So there's a bit of logistics that you need to sort out before implementing that policy, but it is a good policy to have.
So would you go as far as to say for individuals, even if they're getting a computer that their 15-year-old's going to use more than anyone, that antivirus that comes with the consumer is not even worth your money, or is that a minimum that's better than nothing?
Yeah, I say if your 15-year-old is sharing your computer with you, they're probably placing your organization at pretty high risk, because you have no idea what they're downloading and how they're using the system. So in those types of situations, like it.
Sorry, but I meant like if it's mostly the 15-year-old's computer, would they bother having antivirus software, or is that just a waste of money?
They should still have like a good quality antivirus, or like a EDR product still.
Okay, no, that's good to know, because obviously we're all using more than one computer and phone these days, so it's good to know what level and where it makes difference and what you should actually access. So
sure.
we have another question. Creating a plain account with no admin access for day-to-day work requires an admin password to download a file to it. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure I understand the question. We'll just need to get some clarification before I can ask it. I was reading real time because we're running out of time. So we are running out of time. And Vince, if we could share the deck, I think there's a lot of content in there that kind of everybody's scrambling, and you put enough fear in that that I'm sure people will have some actions and some research to do. So I love it. That's important. And I think cybersecurity is something that we do have to take serious at every single level that the members of AHA are at. So whether you're sitting at that executive driving the decisions and really being accountable for the risk, or you're at a different level and you're an employee just getting your job done and trying to do the best work you can, you have a role to play in cybersecurity, and one that you should take very serious. And as we alluded to, you also have a role to play within your home and your personal life as well, because there's risks and exposures with everything we do in today's world. So thank you, Vince, for highlighting some important things to consider and the way that these hackers get it done. I want to just bring up the admin items one more time. So AHA with Amplify, January's indirect tax, you can sign up. We put it on the chat, but we'll also send an email for registration soon. We have system selections and hot topics in IT coming in February. We plan to have an in-person live event in March. So that will be available for registration, we assume, in January. And we invite you to look at Lively Entrepreneur Talks with Amplify, which is our video podcast series. And finally, for those of you that don't realize, we are so young compared to Vince, because Jesse and I waited till our late 30s to open Amplify, and Vince apparently did it in diapers if he's 25 years old.
Yeah, no.
Absolutely ridiculous looking at you and hearing you say that. It's like something's not aligned. You look
No, I'm
way
much
too
older.
young.
I'm much older than I look.
You look way too young to have a business that old. But but Amplify is has celebrated 5 years as of last month, and we're going to be doing a little birthday party in May. So please be sure to get your name on that birthday party list, and how to do that will come through email shortly to all the members. We really want to make sure that the AHA members attend that event because it's something to celebrate, and I think milestones are worth celebrating, and it's because of people like you that we've hit this particular milestone. So with that, we are done 2023 AHA with Amplify, and we hope you have a great holiday season and that we have the opportunity to have these conversations with you in the new year. Thanks so much, Vince. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Thanks for having me. Hope you guys enjoyed it.
Awesome. Have a good day.
You too. Bye for now.
Thanks.